Hey everyone, this is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. I thank you for coming and joining us for Prime Lunchtime with the City Manager. Hey Brian, how are you?
Hey Rico, how are you?
Good seeing you again. It's been a while. I know we've been sort of a week past our normal stuff, so I appreciate you making time for me. I do want to share with everyone, our sponsors and thank them. So we have EV Remodeling Inc., a company that does a lot of design and build and a lot of renovation work here in the city of Peachtree Corners and in the metro area. Eli, the owner, lives here in Peachtree Corners. Great family. They do great work. You should check them out. We do appreciate their support of our podcasts and our advertising in our magazines. So go to evremodelinginc.com and find out a little bit more about them. As well, our other lead sponsor is Clearway Fiber. They do a lot of internet. All of it is internet for business and residential. They do a lot of work in the city of Peachtree Corners. In fact, you'll find some of the highlighted businesses that they do that have um, that are clients of theirs that have taken on their service for their work and their businesses. You'll find some of those profiles appearing in Peachtree Corners magazine over the next few months to learn a little bit more about how those companies work here in the city. You may not even realize they exist here, and also see how Clearwave works for them. So check them out, Clearwave Fiber. If you Google them, Peachtree Corners, you'll see exactly what they're doing here. So want to thank them also for being a sponsor of these podcasts and our magazine. Okay, now that I've done that and thanked everyone, there's a lot of stuff that I just want to get into, but the biggest part is the upcoming work session, Brian. And people may not realize what that is. So a work session is the session that's held prior to a city council meeting, which is held once a month. Both of them are held once a month. And that work session is really to work through the process and seeing proposals and presentations prior to that city council meeting. So this way the city council can probably have their questions during that session answered during that city council meeting. Um,
And in addition to prepping council for what's going to be put in front of them for formal votes, it gives council opportunities to provide input and staff has time to make adjustments from the time between when I present council stuff at the work session and then the 2 weeks later, the city council meeting. So we make tweaks to certain things.
right.
No votes are taken at a work session. It's kind of the sleeves rolled up type of
Mm-hmm.
discussion. I also put stuff in front of council that don't actually require formal action, but I want their guidance on things, or I'll take their temperature on stuff. So it's a informal meeting, but it's a public meeting, and council is there in their capacity as members of the governing body, and they're getting ready, these issues ready for formal action at the
Mm-hmm.
subsequent council meeting.
So obviously this is a work session, so there's no public comments here, but anyone's welcome to come visit and listen in to these work sessions.
That's correct. They're public meeting. There is no public comment, so there's no interaction with council. There's no votes taken by council. This is
So
just
just for, right, and just so that people know, I think originally there were two council meetings, I think, a month when the city first started or something like that.
no. There
Or
was
no?
still only one, but they
Okay.
did the work session on the same night as
Ah,
council meeting. They
okay.
would do
Right.
it first in a. The problem with that is when you go a month between getting council together, it can be problematic when you sometimes I need interaction with them
Mm-hmm.
on and so I split that out, and so now it's every 2 weeks they get
Okay.
together. One is the work session and then one is the council meeting, so it makes it to where I get them in a room often
Okay.
enough that I can get the answers I need or get them prepared for the votes I need.
Right. Right. So this is happening September 12th, Tuesday. And it may happen a little earlier than normal, it sounds like, because it's going to be a packed meeting. Um, so that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what's going to be going on in that meeting a little bit. So let's start with, so for example, the parking deck is going to be brought up. It's going to be the design of the parking deck is going to be presented. Um, talk a little
At
bit
the
about
forum,
that.
at the forum. Yeah, the
Correct.
forum's parking deck. Yeah.
Correct. I'm sorry. I should have been more clear. Then this is the parking deck that will be built behind Belk's, if I'm correct.
Right next to Belk. Yeah, there that big open surface parking lot that they have there is where the parking deck will go in. And the parking deck's purpose is to replace the parking stalls that are being removed on the main boulevard
Right.
of the forum for those, public spaces and the jewel box stores that are going in. Well, they're taking up parking and we need to replace it. So the design of that parking deck and how it'll screen itself from the neighboring residents is the last piece of the forum's rezoning that they needed to do, and that is council had to approve the design of the parking deck. So that's one of the items that they'll see the renderings of it, and they'll make any comments.
How many, and I forget now, how many floors, how many spots will be roughly in that deck?
I think it's going to be 3 floors, or call it 2 covered floors, and then the top floor is open to the elements.
Right.
And I want to say it's 300 and some change spots.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because anyone that goes through the forum now obviously can't go through all the forum because of near Jason's Deli. That's where they're building that 2-story or 2 floors, I guess. Jewel boxes back there, and hopefully that should be finished. I forget when they said that was going to be finished, but not too far into the future. I'm sure a few more months. It looks like they're really on their way to getting that done. And that parking deck, I think, if I remember correctly, one of the options was also talked about sealing the wall part facing Amberfield. So this way like it's a full solid wall on the back there versus open space.
That is correct. It is a solid wall as it faces the neighboring residents, so there won't be any light pollution of headlights as cars make turns inside or park. So that's part of it.
Anything special? Any special features like EV charging station? Anything special that will be done to it?
I mean, there are going to be EV charging stalls. It's going to have security cameras. It has, special lighting to keep, the light pollution down, that are built into hooded, locations along the walls. So the purpose of it is just to provide a parking deck that looks good from the outside. It ties in architecturally with the rest of the forum, so it's going to look the same as the current architectural features, and it screens the neighboring residents so they don't have to have their quality of life affected by the operations within the parking deck.
Right. And I would imagine there would be immediate access from that parking deck through between the buildings to get to the forum, I guess. Or I'm not sure how they're adjusting that, but
there'll be 2 ways to get to the parking deck. One is under the arch right there by the big fountain.
Right.
And the other would be coming around the backside by Ted's Montana Grill.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That would be the other way to get to and from the parking deck. There won't be any way to get there from the north side of the building.
Does that's going to start? That construction is going to start probably, I guess, somewhere in first quarter.
Correct.
Do they know how long it'll take to finish? Any estimates?
9 months.
Really? Okay. All right. Okay.
And then once it's done, they can start removing the remainder of the parking stalls in the middle boulevard, heading down towards and finishing up in front of Belk.
Right. According to the plans, it looks like that's where an entertainment stage would be built.
Yep.
And some of the jewel boxes and a concierge area and stuff. Cool. So anyone that wants to come see, there will be plans presented of what this is going to look like. And then it'll be taken up at the next city council meeting. And that's where a vote would be, that next city council meeting.
Correct. September 26th, 2 weeks later, is when council would formally approve that via a vote.
Gotcha.
But they'll see the designs
in case I have any questions.
And provide input. Yeah, have questions. And there might be some tweaking. They're like, oh, we don't like that. We like, X, we like Y better or whatever.
Right, right. All right, cool. So the other big thing that's going to be happening at that work session will be discussion with City Marshal and the regulations that are going to be in place. Stuff like, do you do car chases? What do you use of force? A bunch of things like that. But also the design of the vehicles. The vehicle wrap is going to be presented as well. So tell us a little bit about what type of regulations are going to be discussed, and is there anything surprising, along the way that you found, or yeah, fill us up.
So, our city marshals are going to be post certified law enforcement officers. So they're going to have the exact same authority that you would have as somebody who calls themselves a police officer.
Hmm.
But when you have that, you've got to have policies in place to regulate how they use that authority that come with being post-certified law enforcement officers. So for instance, use of force. What kind of guidelines are we going to give them to say the escalation of force or high-speed pursuit, or when are they going to be authorized to chase a vehicle at a high rate of speed, turn
Hmm.
on their sirens, things like that. You've got other little things like, the vehicle use policy. Where can they drive the vehicle? How
Hmm.
far? Because
Mm.
we're letting them use them as take-home vehicles, which is very
Right.
common in the law enforcement community. And how far out do you let them drive? And then even the design of some of their, uniforms and the wrap of the vehicles will
Okay.
be discussed, because so that this is all getting them in preparation for the November council meeting. And why that's important is by November, I will have the chief marshal in place. I just concluded my interviews. We advertised for the position, and I just concluded last week my series of interviews of candidates, and I'll start the negotiation of our first candidate to see about all the typical
Mm.
stuff, money and everything like that.
Right.
We'll
Right.
have the chief marshal in place by November, and we'll have the policies in place by then. We can have the vehicles wrapped by then, and all those things that you need, the intergovernmental agreements with some of the surrounding law enforcement agencies. And there's a lot of them, like how do we tie into the radios that Gwinnett County uses? That's really important
Mm.
to us because they're still our primary, police
Yeah.
department. Getting access to, and set up so that our marshals can look at the entirety of our video surveillance, system that we have in the
Hmm.
city. We have a significant amount of cameras. Getting all those things accessed. I will be ready by November. And so the November City Council meeting, we're going to have a formal, call it swearing in ceremony,
Hmm.
where they'll be sworn in as,
Well.
marshals, which theoretically is symbolic because they already have the authority. But that'll be when, we'll invite the media. They'll be available for interviews. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about it. And then that is when they're ready to start going out into the community, and you'll start seeing them out there doing their thing. Prior to that, I
Mm.
need to, again, have the policies that sets their left and right limit. And that's not, we're not quite there. So council's going to be fed policies over the next 3 work session and city council meetings in
Gotcha.
preparation for that November. So some of the ones on the September work session are going to be, some of those policies like use of force and,
So
high speed
the
pursuit.
does that, when they vote on that, that would be in November. I'm assuming it's um, it will be they will there be public comment at that point on the regulations? How does that work? If citizens
Yep.
want to
The
review it, comment on
policy,
it.
the policy would be adopted via ordinance, which has a public hearing component. So
Okay.
when it is presented, the public will certainly be able to, make comment on the
Okay.
policy. So, yep.
And that would happen in November, I guess? The public comment as well, or prior to
Well,
that?
anytime each of these policies requires a separate vote.
Oh, okay.
So like, use of force as individual officers,
Hmm.
that's a vote because that's a standalone policy. Body cameras,
Right.
when they're turned on, when they're supposed to be turned on, how long you store it, all that kind of stuff. That's another policy, and that's voted on separately. So you're going to have a series of these policies. It's not just one,
Okay.
amalgamation of all of these together. It's individual policies that,
So does that happen over time until November or in November?
yeah,
Over time.
there'll be a few over the next three council meetings.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So people should be aware of that if they want to attend or put up public
Yeah, just
comments or
look at,
something.
watch the website, the agendas go out no later than noon on Friday before the
Hmm.
following Tuesday city council meeting. And if you see one of the policies on there that they're voting on that's of interest to you, then you'll know that that's the meeting that you should show up to.
Gotcha. Cool. And the city wrap, that design, the uniform design, that's also all coming out at that work session on September 12th, I
Yep.
guess. All right, cool. Um, these work sessions are great, like you said. I mean, because it just allows stuff to be discussed and get information or adjustments done before the actual city council meeting and vote. So that's it's good the city's doing that. The other thing, I guess, is with the hurricane season starting,
Well,
and
real quick,
yeah,
Rico,
sure, go ahead.
one other thing you may want to talk about before we get off of the work session is the
Sure.
pickleball feasibility study.
Okay. All right. And you're right. That's actually going to be presented prior to the beginning of or at the first thing of the work session, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the work session. We just may start the meeting early because that is the one thing that, even though it's a work session, I think council is going to open up the floor to
Hmm.
anybody who's there about the feasibility study. Because we
Okay.
had a lot of stakeholders that we invited to be part of this feasibility study, and we've invited them back,
Right.
and we want them as it's fresh on their mind. The mayor's going to let, if any of them have any comments that they want to make on it, they'll do it there, which doesn't usually happen at a work session, and it'll only
Hmm.
be that particular thing. But they're going to open up
Okay.
the
So
floor
they
and let anybody make comments.
so they're going to make a presentation first, and they'll open up the floor. And if
Yep.
I understand correctly, is there anything you could say about that study prior to that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, what they're going to do is they're going to come back and they're going to tell us how supportive our area, whether
Hmm.
it's inside of our corporate limits or the greater, area outside our boundaries, but this part of North Metro Atlanta, how much support there is for pickleball, how big of a facility they think that um, should be, constructed if we want to have a facility that's hitting the sweet spot. It's not too big, it's not too small, and they've looked at really three different sizes
Hmm.
of facilities, and they'll come back and they'll tell us which one they think is the one that hits that, makes that tuning fork go off when it comes to, use and support for it from the local community. So that's the conclusion of the study, as to which size would be that sweet spot for us to
Right.
meet demand but not overbuild and not be able to fill it, versus it, or don't underbuild. Where is that? What number
Right.
is that? How
Right.
many are indoor? How many are outdoor? Is there a food and beverage component? All of that is part of the study.
Well, true. So, I mean, obviously, a 10-court place would really be more of an altar size, maybe, going anywhere from a 24 to a 50 court or 40 court, going from a regional to a national. They're going to discuss like you said, what that sweet spot's going to be
Yep.
for the city. And the city's going to be talking also about, or at least the proposal will talk about, that private public partnership, what that could look like, I guess. Does the city take on the construction of it and then the rest of it's done by private industry? Or is it, built with public-private cooperation? I mean, that's all going to be part of that discussion, I guess, or presentation.
Yeah, I mean, it will, we can only go so far on that because one, I'm not going to have a private partner, standing next to me saying we've already
Sure.
hammered out the details. We
Right.
certainly can't talk about location yet because we don't currently own any property in which this would go.
Have they,
So,
will they
get
make
into location.
will they make recommendations though in the feasibility study as far as look possible areas versus exact location?
Probably not, just because what it does is it makes it difficult for us to acquire it if somebody is like,
Yeah.
oh, we heard that you're
Well,
interested. I mean, because if a certain area of the city
mhm.
is conveyed to be a good place, you and I both know that you don't have to know, there's a lot of people that can then say, oh, they want this area of the city. Well, the only place it makes sense is, and then they can
Right.
zero in on. And so it just makes it difficult when you do that because, when
Hmm.
people think the city is the one or a city is the one behind a purchase, they're like, oh, deep pockets. And then they start holding out for more money. And,
Yes.
so that's why
Yeah.
we can't really, I don't want to get, we
Yeah.
certainly have locations that we have our eye on
Hmm.
that we think it would work. But just if we talked about it
Yeah.
yet, we could actually hurt ourselves and would have to pay more money than we might have to pay if we
Right.
don't, forecast
Interesting. Right. Because I think that also, I think if I remember correctly, that happened with the roundabout at Medlock Bridge. When people found out that that's where the roundabout was going to be before the property had to be purchased or parts of properties had to be
Yeah.
purchased. Yeah. I'm sure that was a bit of a problem at the time, I think.
Oh yeah, we
To,
had to ultimately condemn two of the slivers of property to get them to sell because
right.
their their sale price was 300% higher than the appraised value.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No doubt. People want to make their money when they can, I
uh,
guess. Um, all right, cool. So people should be able to come. You should be able to attend, and you should attend September 12th to find out more about these things. It's going to be a heavy duty work session, probably a, a longer one than usual, I'm sure. Um, so let's also get on to a little bit about, like I was saying before, the hurricane season is coming in. Some of these hurricanes are possibly going to be worse than usual. Certainly the category 4 that hit Florida and went through Florida missed Peachtree Corners really. We got some heavy rains, but it wasn't bad. Could have been worse. And it skirted southeast of Georgia going up. But, when I saw that, and I think Bush Road got hit with no power at one point. I think during that, or I think around that time. So a section of Bush Road, that area, those communities were without power for a few hours, I think. Um, does the city, between power outages, possible floodings, and we talked about this a little before, and I didn't even know this, I'll admit, that things are built based on a 50-year flood plain or flood zone. I just assumed it was 100 or more. I didn't realize it was only a 50-year mark. And people don't even know. I think if you go to certain parks, you could actually see a 500-year mark of a flood mark in some of the, I think it was, I saw that, I think it was Tilly Mill, one of the big parks. So we've been hit with major floods in certain parts of Gwinnett County at one time over the last 250, 500 years. Not to say that that would happen again, uh, but how does the city look at that, at weather, at power outages? I know people on sometimes next door they say, we're a smart city. Why do we keep, when the wind blows, the power goes out or something? I'm sure that's a bit of an exaggeration, but sometimes I feel the same way, when it's not even storming and the power's going out or flickering. So how does the city address those things?
well, let me unpack this and separate two components of what we really face in Peachtree Corners when it comes to severe weather, and that's flooding and power outage.
Mhm.
Flooding the city has much more of a direct role in that. So I'll start with, we're part of the National Flood Insurance Program with the federal government and FEMA. And we are also part of their community rating system, which is basically like ISO for fire, which is you get graded. And the better you're prepared for, say, fire, you get a better ISO rating. And the better ISO rating you get, the lower your homeowner's insurance is, because insurance companies say, hey, we feel like that community is less apt to have a fire event destroy the property because the fire department and the water supply and everything is good. So we voluntarily enrolled in that program, and we have a rating. For the first time 2 years ago, I think we got, and we improved it last year, which helps everybody's flood insurance, homeowners insurance. It decreased the rate. But we have a stormwater management plan within the city, and we do and the stormwater user fee that you pay on your property tax bill every year, which is a fee based on how much impervious surface you have in the city, which is, surface that doesn't allow water to percolate into the soil. So rooftop, driveway, sidewalk, things like that. What that goes to is the program of us managing the overall drainage infrastructure for the city. And, we maintain, inspect and maintain and repair as needed a lot of underground and even open drainage, facilities, detention ponds, underground drainage lines, detention vaults, stream bank restoration, keeping erosion from, and, we have creeks in the city, we have lakes in the city, we've got, all this stuff that we have to manage. And because everybody's water has to flow at some point into the public system, and that public system is our responsibility. So that money goes to us in doing inspections, going through the program, and then making repairs. And there's a lot of repairs that are done proactively, and then there are a lot of reactive ones. We have sinkholes that develop within the city at locations where there is a broken pipe, a collapsed pipe, a pipe section that's separated, and then water's getting outside the pipe and it erodes.
Yeah. Was that Gunning Road or Peachtree Station? I forget where that
Well,
happened.
Flippin' Trail had a big one.
All right, so go ahead, start. Sorry about the disruption. In case we got disrupted, we're back on track now. So let's get to it. It was about the water disruption.
Yes, right. So finishing up drainage. So, the city uses this money to both proactively make upgrades to our public drainage system and to make repairs. The result is we don't necessarily have a flooding problem, like a whole scale one. We do have isolated locations where you can get certain structures that are below grade and water flows, kind of through their property, and we address it on a case-by-case basis. But we're set up pretty well. One thing people have to remember is a lot of these subdivisions and homes, were only designed back in the day to a 50-year flood event. And so, that's essentially like handle rain that you would get once every 50 years. Well, weather's changed, and now we're getting into 100, 150 year flood events. And, the standards have gone up on new builds, but we have a lot of subdivisions that were built 25 years and older. And sometimes, you just get a lot of water that hits in a very short period of time. And the drainage pipes can only handle so much water. And then water backs up until it's like traffic. Rush hour is merely, an example of trying to push, so many cars down a road that has so many lanes all at once, and water's the same way. And so our flooding tends to be temporary when we have it in areas. and it just has got to let the system flush it out. But that's the drainage part. The flooding part. Yes, it can happen when you get a lot of rain in a short period of time. Or I guess you could, if we had a long rain, like days and days and days of it, where the water gets so soaked that it does not take any any more water, that can also do it. But that is one. Now, transitioning into electricity. As we all know, you lose electricity through a number of ways. Most of the time here, it's due to falling trees or limbs into power lines. That's how most of it happens here. Now, rain can actually, we could have an event. In fact, the storm we had, 2 days ago, 2 nights ago,
Yep.
we didn't really have any high wind. We just had a lot of rain, and we actually had a really big tree fall into the roadway just because the ground got so saturated. It had been leaning just enough, and then just the roots were in ground that had become. So that is one. Now, when it comes to high winds, that can certainly wreak havoc. And, when that happens, we react by having, and we had this, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we had the big
40, 50 mile an hour gusts of wind. Not
and
for
we had
long,
a
either.
lot of trees down here in the city, and our public works crews came in and started cutting trees that were blocking roads. Now, where we run into a problem is when trees are into live power lines. We can't cut those trees and remove them, by blocking roads until the power company shuts off the power. So it all depends on how many crews they have out and how many trees that are still laying in live power lines is how fast we can clear the road and how fast you get power. The best way to alleviate this, there's the more inexpensive way, and that is Georgia Power goes through sections of the city, and they basically stand under the power lines, and they look up, and they look at limbs that are hanging over the power lines, and maybe a few trees that they feel are, and they remove those. So, a limb hanging over a power line, falling doesn't, cut power because they've cut the limb back. And so that's one way, and they have done that. We did a lot of that about a year and a half, 2 years ago in the Spalding, along Spalding Drive, down in Neely Farm, Gunnin Road. There was a lot of it. East Jones Bridge, Jones Bridge, West Jones Bridge. They're due to do another one of those. It's also controversial. Sometimes people don't like that, or sometimes the limbs that have to be removed are going to kill the tree, and so the whole tree's got to go. And some of those trees are actually not, they're on private property, and so some homeowners get upset about it. So that's not without controversy either. So that's one way to do it, and that's the more inexpensive way to help protect the power lines. The best way is to what they call harden, and that is basically to bury. And, burying power lines is always the best way to, protect and harden the system, but it's very expensive.
Has that been done, and where has it been done in Peachtree Corners?
I mean, you have places, Technology Park, all the power lines are buried. But in the residential neighborhoods, you oftentimes only have it inside the neighborhood. So, for instance, I live in Riverfield. Inside our neighborhood, it's buried, but where we tie in on East Jones Bridge is not. So if East Jones Bridge gets hit by a tree, we're out of electricity. Now, the power company also tries to do loop. They try to loop the electricity, so there's a redundant or call it a secondary method to get electricity. So if you had a circle and there was a break, in one part, you still have the ability to get electricity the other way. That's an expansion of the system. They try to do that as well, but it just comes down to money and where Georgia Power is looking, where there are other communities that have risks that are greater than ours. So I can't
Right.
speak on their um, their process, but I do know that they use, and we've loaned them or helped supplement their technology by using lidar to a form of radar to actually map where limbs
Hmm.
were creating a risk to the lines, and so they've used technology to identify the more higher risk areas. But that's the flooding and the electricity part and
Right.
how it happens and how we address it. We certainly, as a municipality, are here when trees go down or blocking roads, or people are stranded. We have an emergency response plan. We can stand up certain positions within the city. Our marshals will be another resource when they start going out and work in the community. In late November, they're going to carry things like chainsaws in the trunk of their vehicles,
Hmm.
and
Cool.
they'll be able to go out and do things like that. So, it's unfortunate.
Right.
We all live with it. Weather is not getting any more calm. It's getting more
No.
extreme.
Yeah, for
But
sure. For sure. Yeah, I mean, since '95, I think perceptibly I've seen more uh, harsher weather happening here. I don't, anecdotally anyway, I've seen it.
yeah,
Um, so it is not gonna get better. And they're even talking about a harsh winter, maybe. So who
and then
knows?
then you can get ice on the power lines, and they get too
Yes,
heavy.
right.
And you get power poles that will fall because of that, or power lines snap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just burying it is always the best, but it's expensive and it
Mm-hmm.
requires sometimes more property, and
Right.
intrudes into people's yards and front entrances of subdivisions. And I wish it was easy and inexpensive, but it isn't. And
Yeah.
so that's where we're at.
I think people just, if they really are in need of electricity for whatever reason, they should make sure they have a generator, a gas generator or a Generac, something that's installed using gas or propane or something like that. I'm not being, that's if you really need it for some reason, that's a good way of backing that up. Um, I just want to go through a couple of quick things, and then we can do a wrap. I just a couple of things I'm just curious about right at this point. Charlie Roberts, what we call the Charlie Roberts property, which is the property which is not Charlie Roberts' property anymore. It was bought by a different company. I can't pronounce the name right now.
Terwilliger Pappas.
Thank you. And I could have, if I had it written in front of me, maybe, um, but they're going to. I think they've moved a few things, but when are they actually going to? Do you have any idea when they're actually going to break ground behind Chase and HW Steakhouse there? I guess and start
In
doing things.
November, they're going to start site work. The development they is called Solis,
Right, Solis.
Sollis,
Hmm.
and they're going to break ground in November, or not break. I mean, but they're going to start site work. Prepping the pad for them to go vertical, but they're going to start in November.
Okay, and they're probably going to take 6 to 12 months, I guess, to build it out.
Yeah, it'll be a 12-month
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the other one that's north of Racetrack and the wine store, that span there, or they're already pre-selling. I don't know if they finished any units yet. I think they might have some units finished, but they're pre-selling units there now. They're actually doing tours. I think they actually have a complete unit or two. Um, so they're moving along. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's Broadstone.
Right.
The apartment units, I do believe there's a section that's done,
Yeah.
but the townhomes have gone vertical. You can see those.
Hmm.
The ones closest to the liquor store there,
Right.
and then they've got the office, the commercial building that was existing there. It's being rebuilt. That's going up right now too. So I think
Okay.
most of what they're going vertical with has actually gone vertical, and
Yeah.
so it's just
Seems
a
like
matter
it.
of finishing it.
Yeah. So I mean, lots of stuff going on. I think obviously Intuitive is further along where they want to be. Some of the building looks like it's actually the outsides are actually a little closer to finish, and they're probably working on the inside as well. Quick Trip demoing. There's nothing that they have to. They're just going to build right on where they have it. They're probably going to take up that same building pad, I bet, to
They
build it,
are.
right? Okay, because
It's a
otherwise they'd
little
be
bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger, but they're basically
okay.
building a newer store right on the very same, location. But, these kind of things, as you know, it's a competition. Racetrack has their store, their floor plan and their, site
Right,
plan. And, QT has got to compete with it. They've got to have certain stations and a flow about it. And
right,
so their store was, showing its age. So they just said, we're going to build, it's not uncommon. We had Chick-fil-A do the same thing. We had
right.
Wendy's do the same thing,
Yeah,
just upgrading their store. So yeah,
yeah.
QT is just going down to the ground and building a brand new one on the same pad.
Are they? Do you know if they're going to? I'm assuming they're also going to take out the gas tanks underground, or they're going to keep what they have there.
So they're going to keep it there. I don't know if
Really?
they may
Okay.
be going to more pumps.
Okay.
Like one more additional pump on each of
Yeah.
the islands. I don't know that for sure, but the
Mm.
tanks are staying underground and
So
they're
the
just
tanks are.
staying.
So they're in good condition, I'd imagine. I just keep wondering why half the pumps are yellow bagged over there, but I guess that's a question for them because maybe they're
Yeah,
not
I
getting
don't
enough
know.
supply or something. Yeah. Um, the other building that I saw was the BB&T building, which is right across from CVS, part of the Forum, not part of that property, but an extension of it. That they just gated that out and they're pulling things out of it. It's going to remain a bank, it sounds like, what we
Yeah,
were
it's a credit
discussing.
union of some sort. I don't remember the name. I had not personally heard of this credit union, but
Okay.
I know they're doing a renovation over there. I think they're removing some of the drive-in
Hmm.
stuff because nobody uses drive-in really anymore.
Right, right. ATM
Or
probably.
right, ATM, or maybe they're even removing some of the lanes completely because there's just not enough. Because I think they have like 4 lanes that you could go in the drive-through over there.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, there's some renovation of some sort, but it is staying in the financial. It's another financial institution.
Okay. Um, anything new going on that we should be aware of, revitalizing wise or redevelopment wise? Anything special that pops out that over the last month and a half?
I mean, the redevelopment authority has got 2 big projects they're working on the south side of the city. One is some trailhead locations, where
Hmm.
you're talking about being able to drive your car and park it there with bathrooms and playground, picnic areas, and it'll tie into the multi-use trail system. And then we've got some, housing going on down on the south side as well that we're going to help try and um, facilitate the construction of, what is oftentimes, called, starter home, workforce housing, but equity
Okay.
product. These are buildings you purchase, you don't rent, but to try to do it in a way that it's affordable,
Hmm.
meaning it's market rate, but it's at the, we're going to try to help facilitate keeping it from the owners from maxing out the amount they can get for it because that tends to price people right out of the market.
Right. There's
And
no
so
way to keep it to like one purchaser, like a like someone that buys it that lives there versus someone picking up 10 of these properties as an
you
investment or
mean
something.
owner occupied?
Correct. Thank you. I've
Well,
lost that phrase.
interestingly enough, we are looking at potentially an ordinance where we are going to limit the commercial purchasing of equity products in which, some company buys, say 10 townhomes
Right.
and then they turn around and rent the townhomes.
Yeah.
And, that defeats the purpose of trying to get somebody who is an owner occupied tenant of the building, which we feel increases the odds that they put roots in the community. They own
Mm-hmm.
something here. So they're like, you know what? I may want to stay here a long time. I may want to get civically active and get my kids enrolled versus, sometimes, not all the time, there's always
Mm-hmm.
exceptions to this, but sometimes renters feel that they're much more, flexible in where they live. And so they don't get as involved in the community because they're thinking, well, I can leave very
Right.
quickly and I
Right.
may not stay here. So I'm not going to get involved like I would if I owned. So that's generally the
There's
debate between the two products.
there's more pride, I think, when you own it, and more investment also that you take care of it because you do own it. It's an investment in what you can sell later at a better price, maybe. Um,
Yeah, I agree with you. There's again
the
always exceptions, but I
yeah,
think if you own something and if it gets damaged, it's on you to fix it. You tend to
right,
take care of things more than if you were a renter.
yeah, and I think I've, I've seen it at least in the city of Atlanta and in some parts outside, like Habitat for Humanity. Is that right? Yeah. And some other organizations that actually do these types of, they'll do 10 or 15 home structures like that in an area. I mean, has the city thought about working with organizations like that? Um, because those end up for sure in the hands of people that could use them, that are starter homes like that.
Oh, they will be a part of this project. We've already
Or they
talked
will
to
be.
have. Oh, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
excellent. When do you know when that's happening or when the regulation that you talked about, the owner occupied stuff, the limitation on that? Any idea
Uh,
when?
I mean, we're internally, city attorney, community development director, and I are, you know, kind of looking at case law and other precedent to see how far we can push that. We're
Okay.
probably a month or two away of presenting council something for them to consider.
All right. Cool.
You know,
All right. Great. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff. Peachtree Corners Festival is coming up in September. I know that the second annual Electrify Expo, is that what we're calling it, is happening during I think during the festival, actually the second day maybe.
yep.
Of, cool. And Jim Ellis is one of several probably dealerships that bring in their cars to it. And anyone can actually register to bring their own electric cars, vehicles, to this event to show off.
Yes, it is an EV car show of any type, and we've had everything from just your run of the mill, off the line electric vehicle, Tesla
Hmm.
or whatever, to very unique retrofitted vehicles,
Yeah.
some vintage stuff that's been, I mean, the Batmobile,
Yeah, I saw that.
just yeah,
Yeah.
just some interesting stuff. So yeah, if it's EV and you want to bring it out, or you want to come
Yeah.
and see some of the unique EV, options that are out there, come to that part of the show. I mean, it'll be in the same
Yeah.
parking lot as the vintage car show that's associated with
Okay.
the festival.
Okay. And I think I remembered last year, even Paul Duke STEM had their electric
Yep,
race team there with their car that they built. Um,
correct.
and they've been racing around the region actually ever since then, I think, or before then
Yep.
even. So kind of cool stuff. So if you have an electric vehicle that looks interesting that you put together, definitely go to the city's website, register and show up and show off your stuff. So that's a good thing. Um, great. I think we've hit more than I thought we had. So it's all good. Appreciate Brian that you join me every month to talk about these things. Eventually, at some point, I'd like to actually do this live. You all are watching this. If you're watching it live, it's actually a simulcast live stream, which means that we've recorded it, but we're streaming this live on our Facebook pages and YouTube as well. But at some point, we may be looking at TikTok, doing some of this on there, or on X or Twitter. Do we call it that? I don't know, space where we might be able to stream some stuff, take some live questions. So still working that up, looking for a sponsor if there's anyone out there that would like us to do that. And just to share that we're also doing a sports podcast. So I have a former student intern that's actually taking up and doing a sports podcast with student athletes and such. So that'll be a video podcast follow up with an article. We're going to be doing that once or twice a month. So check that out when it comes out. And if you have any ideas that you'd like to share with us about coverage and stuff, certainly do that. I want to thank our sponsors again, EV Remodeling Inc. and Clearway Fiber for stepping up, for supporting us, for these podcasts as well as the publications and doing the things that we do. Journalism isn't always easy. We try to get the facts right as best we can. This is why I do these podcasts also, and Brian does it with me to make sure that we're putting out good, accurate information versus what you might see sometimes posted that may be totally wrong or inaccurate. So this is what we're trying to do. And sometimes we'll make mistakes on the print reporter side, but between me and Brian, we'll clarify these things as we go. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you,